Hello, YouTube University students, and welcome back to Opa's Garage. And in Opa's Garage today, we have a 2001 F350 Super Duty with a 7.3 Powerstroke. And what we're doing to it is replacing the turbo pedestal O-rings that are notorious for leaking, as well as we are going to eliminate the exhaust back pressure butterfly. One thing that I do want you to notice is that on this truck I do have the crossover tube, and the turbo has been removed. The crossover tube is still in place. The crankcase vent is still intact on the driver's side valve cover. It does not have to be removed to get the turbo out. All of that stuff that you hear and see people saying that you got to take everything off of the engine to get the turbo out, that is a myth. I did have to remove one of the intercooler pipes, but other than that, and then the bracket for the main wiring harness. So let's go over and take a look at what we got as far as what we're working on. The parts are out here on the flatbed, and this is the turbo pedestal that I took off, and this is the turbo that I took out. The leaks that most people experience are the O-rings on top. There are O-rings that you can see, the yellow O-rings that were on top of the engine, that I'll show you on this one because it's not all dirty, that go down there. Actually, you can see that the engine that this came off of had yellow O-rings, and if you're doing this and you have yellow O-rings and black O-rings, the black O-rings go up on top, the yellow O-rings go underneath. Or I don't know, I think the yellow O-rings withstand higher temperatures. That's, why they're actually in the actual engine itself. But at any rate, to get this shaft out, you have to take this metal piece off here. It'll unthread off that shaft, and then you take this snap ring, which is that snap ring right there, and then this plug right here will come right out. Once you smack that shaft, it'll pop that plug open, or pop that plug out, and you take the guts out of everything, all the guts out of it. I don't have the guts of this one, but at any rate, you take the guts out, and then you take a 1/4 inch NPT, which stands for National Pipe Thread, 1/4 inch, I believe, by 18 NPT tap, and tap this hole. You don't have to make the hole bigger before you tap it. It taps out just perfect. And then you'll take a plug, wrap it with a bunch of Teflon tape, and stick it in there. And then the one thing that I did was I also tapped that hole. I believe it was a number 10 by 32, I want to say. Either 10 by 24 or 10 by 32. I can't remember which. And then I got me a set screw and used some, I don't remember if it was green or red Loctite, but I went ahead and sealed that hole off. And the reason that I sealed that hole off is when I was considering cutting this whole barrel off, there's a couple videos out there where people have cut this barrel off to give you easier access to these two bolts back there, and then they said, you want to weld that hole shut, you want to weld this hole shut, and then there is a valley all the way at the back, which, let me get my flashlight and see if we can't. There at the very, very back, and it's probably not going to focus very well, but anyway, back at the very back there's like a little valley, and they say you want to weld that shut also. And my concern with that was when I dumped fluid down in here, you could see the fluid running through that little valley back there and then coming out this hole here, which is your oil drain for your turbo. This is your oil feed for your turbo, which is also that hole there. When you put air, or when you put any kind of fluid to that, or if you dump fluid down in this hole, you will get fluid out of that hole there, which means that that is actually a pressurized hole, which is why I went ahead and sealed it off so that I don't ever have to worry about getting pressurized oil back inside this cavity. and then they recommend that you weld that hole shut. That hole there goes to up here. If you look in there, you can see there, once again my camera's not going to focus. Anyway, inside there you can see there's a little hole, and that's where that hole goes to. And then you have your actuator for your exhaust back pressure butterfly. This right here has 2 O-rings. My concern is does that hole provide any oil, and will these O-rings eventually leak? And I believe by sealing that hole up there, by putting that plug in there, I don't ever have to worry about pressurized oil getting into this cavity and pressurized oil getting into that hole, coming up here and possibly causing these O-rings to leak. So that's why I did that the way I did it. But for those of you that are thinking about cutting this barrel off, you can actually cut this boss off also. Even though it's threaded, there's nothing that actually threads into it, and you can cut that whole thing off, and yes, it will give you easier access to those 2 bolts. But if you do that, you can go ahead and you do definitely need to weld that hole shut. I would recommend welding this hole shut, and then you will also need to weld that cavity back there. But you don't need to worry about welding that and then it blocking off your oil return, because as you can see, this is the casting for that, and this is also part of the casting for that. It is nice big drain back, so welding that little itty bitty spot up in there is not going to stop you from having a clear passage for your oil to drain back into the engine, which was what one of my concerns was. Also, if you choose to, you can go ahead. That hole right there is about a 7/16. It's actually just a hair bigger, but you can take the 1/4 inch NPT and you can tap that hole and put a plug in there, and then in that case you will definitely either want to weld this hole shut or you'll want to weld that hole shut to make sure that you don't get oil that will, potentially get into this cavity. It would leak out of there if you just plugged off the small hole there. I don't know if you would be able to do a 3/8 plug on the larger portion of the hole, because it looks like it's only about a little more than a 1/2 inch, maybe 5/8 deep, and I don't think that you would be able to get enough threads to actually be able to plug that off unless you drilled the smaller portion out to where everything was all, I don't know what size that is, it's probably 5/8, just guessing. But at any rate, the other thing that you need to do is, like I said, you either need to wire this so that it stays in the open position, or what most people do is they just take the butterfly out and they take the rod out. The way that I ended up doing it is I have access to a plasma cutter, and there are, if you look up in there, you can see there are 2 little rivets. You can grind them out. You can, if you flip that, you can see on the back side, take a little punch, make a little dimple. You can drill them out. I took the plasma cutter at work, and I cut the 2 rivets on this side and popped that butterfly out, and then I took the plasma cutter and I actually just cut the shaft and pulled the shaft out. On this side you don't need to worry about it, it's already plugged off. If you pull the shaft out, then you're going to have a hole that most people take a 3/4, I believe, freeze plug and pound it in this hole right here. One thing that I noticed was that there is, it looks like a steel bushing, I'm guessing for the shaft, but there is a bushing inside there, and once again I took the 1/4 inch NPT and just tapped that bushing, and then I put that plug in there. I went ahead and used red Loctite or green Loctite, I can't remember which, on the threads to help lubricate the threads and to help make sure that it doesn't ever back itself out. The one thing that I can say is that This part here is available by several companies out there. Also, they make a turbo pedestal that already has the barrel removed. It's actually cast without the barrel. There are several companies out there that make them. The turbo pedestal usually runs you about $100. This piece here usually runs you about $80. So with tax and whatnot, shipping, you're looking at about $200. Whereas me being the cheapskate that I am, and valuing my money, and the fact that this whole thing took me probably a half hour at the very, very most, as far as, you know, getting the internals out, tapping that hole, getting the butterfly off, pulling the shaft out, and then tapping that hole. 2 brass plugs, I think they were like a couple bucks a piece. So I have less than an hour into this project, and I have less than $10 as far as actual money out of my pocket. So in my mind, it's worth the, you know, half hour, 45 minutes of your time to do it this way, as opposed to spending $200 to buy the turbo pedestal that once you install it, you can't see it because it's underneath the turbo and up underneath everything on the engine. And also to get this part that is cast and machined without the holes for the shaft that itself, was once again excuse me, once again, once you install that part, you can't see it because it's up underneath everything. So you're spending $200 on parts that once you install them, you don't never see them again. And the turbo pedestals that are available for right around $100, you still have the O-ring, you still have this O-ring, you still have these 2 O-rings underneath. So it's not like you eliminate the chance of ever having leaks again. Those O-rings still have the potential to leak, and so the only thing that you're eliminating is the shaft that comes out of there, which is what I eliminated with this. And once again, I would recommend drilling that out. I don't remember what size drill I used, but it was like 1 size bigger than what the hole actually was. And then tapping that to either 1024 or 1032, and definitely use either red or green Loctite to make sure that that set screw does not ever come out. So at any rate, this is the extent of the video, and I hope it was helpful for everybody. If you enjoyed this video or got something out of it, please hit the like and subscribe button. If not, well, hey, I tried. But that's going to be the end of it. Y'all keep living your best life and get out in the garage and fix something. Later.